So now for a look at scattered site rental activities and rental management. This webinar provides NSP grantees and their partners with keys to successful scattered site rental management. This is the second webinar in the What Now? Marketing, Disposition, and Other Strategies to Dispose of NSP Inventory series. Presenters will cover a range of topics including private and self-management options, development decisions, and NSP rules and regulations. The focus on giving guidance to grantees that are new to scattered site rental, the presenters will provide participants with useful strategies to transition a program's focus from homeownership to rental. In addition, the webinar will cover marketing strategies to ensure the properties are successfully rented. Two studies will also be featured as Homeport in Columbus, Ohio, and Beyond Housing in St. Louis, Missouri, review the critical elements that have led to each of their program successes. So, with us today are a whole slew of folks. We've got Peter Werwath from Werwath Associates and Walter Howell from Enterprise. Bill Brett is the Director of Asset Management for Homeport, which is part of Columbus Partnership in Columbus, Ohio. And Deb Dunbar is the Chief Operating Officer of Beyond Housing in St. Louis, Missouri. And we have with us John Laswick and Hunter Kurtz from HUD, and they'll be around not so much for the presentation, but to in case they can be of help when Q&A sessions are happening. So let me turn this over to Walter Howell to talk a little bit about this webinar series.
Yeah, thanks, Kent. We're excited to present to you all the second in a series of 4 webinars on disposition strategies that we'll be featuring today. As you can see, we're going to be covering scatter site rental, and then next week we'll be covering NSP and land banking. That'll be next Tuesday, and then we'll have a best practices, peer-to-peer, and expert roundtable coming up in a couple of weeks to wrap up this series. Also want to mention to you all that if you're interested in continuing to learn more about disposition strategies, we're going to HUD will be hosting 8 NSP problem-solving clinics coming up in spring and the summer. And the first one is tentatively scheduled for April 24th and 25th in Stockton, California. At each one of the clinics, there's going to be 2 tracks of workshops, one for new grantees and one for more experienced grantees, and there'll all be one-on-one meeting sessions. And I just wanted to mention that on one of the workshop tracks for experienced grantees, we're going to dive a little deeper into the topics that have been gone over in this series, this Disposition Strategies webinar series. So if you're interested in learning more and want to get additional help with some one-on-one consultations with experts, these problem-solving clinics around the country will be an excellent opportunity for grantees to do that. So we wanted to make sure all the grantees on were aware of that. And if you have any questions, the registration for Stockton should be up in the next either today or tomorrow, and you can register for that and then look for information in the coming weeks for the following clinics. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kent, who will introduce the rest of the content for the webinar.
Thank you, Walter. And so it's actually I'll just get it straight to Peter Werwath here of Werwath Associates. He's done a full lot of on scattered site rental activities and added much to the toolkits on the Resource Exchange site, including a video in which he's featured. So, Peter, welcome.
Welcome to you and the whole audience, the participants. See, we have 88 people on, and that's great. And so, let's kick this off. The first part of this is going to be a presentation that will run about 45-50 minutes, but we're broken into 4 question periods. So we certainly want to hear from you at those times, and we'll try to take questions covering things that we've just talked about. And as was mentioned before, we've got a couple of great presentations coming after that from folks who are out there in the trenches doing this kind of work. So to kick things off, we pose a situation. You are a grantee and you have, say, 20 single-family homes spread throughout target areas across the city, and you've tried to sell these homes, but you haven't found any qualified homeowners. The market there is continuing to decline. So what do you do? Well, this is a very typical question that we hear all the time lately, and one of the answers, not the only one, but one is particularly renting these properties. So that's going to be the subject of this. Ken, I'm going to turn the slides, or can I do that?
You can, yeah. If you
have to,
go above this slide, there's a box that says 05 Introduction, and to the right of that is a little right-pointing triangle. That's the next page. But right above slide 05.
I got it. Okay, sure. And okay.
There you go.
Okay, figured that out. Got the technology down. So our goal is to give you answers to questions like the one I just posed and hear your relevant experiences. We don't just want questions from the participants, but any advice or examples you can give. We're going to talk about 4 kind of aspects of site single-family rental, then the case studies. And those 4 things are rental management options, development decisions, decisions that if you're not done renovating the homes, if you're just intending to do this from the very start, things that you would consider. P, requirements related to this activity, and to success. So that's our agenda. This is the first section. So we're going to talk about rental management options. There's really 2 options that everyone can consider who's thinking about getting into this business. And one's hiring a third-party management company, and the other is managing the properties yourselves. We're going to talk about pros and cons of each option. With a third-party management company, since they're working at scale, it would actually be true that this could very often be less expensive. They've got all the specialists, the staff, the maintenance manager, the occupancy managers, and so forth, and operating at scale could very well be less expensive than doing it in-house. It assumes that you're not already at scale doing it yourself, like our two panelists who will speak later. Looking at hiring a third-party manager, there are many property managers who are actually not accustomed to this kind of property management. They either manage multifamily properties or high-end single-family homes. This is a very special niche, so you'd be looking for a company that has this exact kind of experience and a good track record. One of the downsides possibly is you're going to have less direct oversight of the property, which means there's more responsibility for you as the property owner to be really an asset manager who's overseeing the property and occupancy management. So doing it yourself within your own organization, there would be higher labor costs typically if you're working at a small scale. 2 panelists work at a very large scale. They both have about 400 units, I understand. And at that scale, certainly there'd probably be less costly than going outside. But in our example that we started with 20 units, this would typically end up costing you more, at least in staff time. Maybe you're not cost accounting all of it, but it tends to be less efficient. Some advantages would be your staff could be more knowledgeable about NSP requirements. You may be more in touch with the neighborhood and neighborhood organizations, churches, and so forth that would be able to help you reach out to potential renters. You'd have more control over the properties. So there's just some beginning pros and cons. We're going to get into this a little deeper. And first, looking at doing this in-house, we really advise that this is something that's very difficult to start up from scratch. And if your organization doesn't have skilled property management staff, there's going to be a very steep learning curve. There's going to be some risks involved, setting up the systems and hiring the right staff. So this is something not to be taken lightly. It's difficult for a small-scale operation to develop the level of expertise needed. But then again, there may be no viable alternatives in the community. There are no available property managers that handle this type of properties, that are used to doing income certification and meeting those sorts of requirements. Excuse me. And you have to do it yourself, but our advice is to do not force that even. It just may not be a feasible option. If you don't have the staff and systems in-house, you can't find a third-party manager, then you may very likely have to look at other options other than this program model. Whether the property management is in-house or done by a third-party manager, there's some functions, obviously, that have to be carried out in either case. You need to oversee the management of the rentals, ensure compliance with NSP regulations. You got to manage the information system, maintain data and records, oversee maintenance for contractors, and maintain effective, good relations with the renters, collect rents, and enforce all aspects of the lease, and to carry out any necessary evictions. So this is sort of the key roles that are involved. So set forth some of the pros and cons of hired third-party managers. It really is probably the only viable choice if you, the grantee, or as a developer, have no capacity in this area. Also, a manager very often will work citywide or over a broad area, and so they're prepared to work in multiple neighborhoods if the homes are scattered over quite a large area. They certainly, if carefully selected, will have the expertise needed, and as we mentioned before, it could be more cost effective. The third-party manager, the property owner, whether the grantee or a developer or subrecipient, must have some serious responsibilities. With a manager, as I mentioned before, you're in an asset management role. You're not in an active property management role, but it does require active oversight by staff. And this means doing, in our opinion, property inspections at least once annually, more often if you see signs of problems with, say, lack of maintenance or some not keeping up the property by the tenants. We'd suggest regular drive-bys, first at least monthly, maybe if things level out, not so often, but to inspect the exterior and grounds to see if things are being maintained. I just add here that leases for single-family homes often require the tenant to do things like snow removal and lawn maintenance and so forth, watering if necessary. So that's unlike a lot of rental situations. So the tenants would generally have more responsibilities, and in order for the properties not to look run down or be an eyesore in the neighborhood, it's very important that those exteriors be maintained, the grounds be maintained. So the role of the owner with a third-party manager is to review reports, which generally come monthly. It should come at least once a month, to verify if the maintenance costs have been reasonable, to confirm that the properties are producing cash flow, positive cash flow, and to monitor vacancies and collections. If you start seeing vacancies creep up over whatever your pro forma amount is, a rule of thumb would be generally 4 or 5% vacancy being normal. But if you're higher than that or collection problems, you really may need to react to situations over with the party manager and take corrective actions. So we've talked about the options, and this is a time we'd like to take some questions about the option of managing in-house versus hiring a third-party manager, sort of the economies of scale that play into this, what the sort of prerequisites for a capacity are if you're doing this in-house. So do you see any questions so far?
We do, and let's go to Diana. Hi, Diana. Diana, are you there?
Hi, I was on mute.
There you go. Hi. Where are you calling from?
I'm from New Orleans.
Great. And what's your question?
So we're actually, I don't know if you want to hold off until we get more, and if we're going to talk more about the financial matters, but we're looking at doing, we want to do more of a mixed income rental, site rentals, and right now the HUD home limits aren't going to allow us to be financially feasible in doing that. So I'm interested in knowing what would make a successful waiver application to HUD to allow us to charge fair market rents instead of the home limit.
I think I'm going to refer this one to John or Hunter. I mean, with NSP, the residents, you're let's ask you this. Are you a developer or a grantee? What's your role in the project?
Yeah, a developer.
Okay, and what sort of income limits have you agreed to in the project?
Well, right now we're primarily doing rentals in order to meet our 50% AMI targets, but our partner, who's going to be taking over the ownership of the majority of the properties, would like to see more of a mixed income so they can, more income in terms of covering the operating expenses.
Does your agreement with the grantee allow you to have some higher income tenants up to 120 AMI, or does it say all the tenants be below 50% AMI?
I think we're allowed to have up to 120 AMI, but the way that the rental rates are set right now is significantly lower than the fair market value that we were basing our projections on.
Yeah, could you help us out on this? I think I have an answer, but I'd like to hear an official answer on that. Can they go above the home high rents?
We worked up sort of a study with the home people earlier in the program that would allow you to sort of prorate above the high home rents between 8 and 120% median, and so I don't know if that will get you all the way to where you're trying to get, but it does allow you some flexibility there. I think there's still an FAQ posted on that someplace on our resource exchange, but it's basically, it just sort of takes the home rent and multiplies it by some, ratio of, the income over 80% or whatever. So it's not.
Okay.
Diana, you're familiar with the HUD NSP help.info site?
Yeah.
Looked at that. Can't find that AAQ, the ask a question, answer, ask another question, okay? And we'll try to get you the reference information, okay?
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dan. And Peter, I'm curious if you prefer when you're going to an outside management company and you've made that decision, if you prefer an RFP or an RFQ process, and what are some of the main things you like to put in those?
First of all, if you're a grantee or subrecipient, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's necessary for you to use an RFP process and apples for apples bids, as grantees and subrecipients are required to competitively bid. But is not in that role, and I've actually in this role myself and have conducted sort of a less formal solicitation where I've called 2 or 3 management companies. I like to stop by their offices and sort of see how they operate and meet the people on the staff, the key people, and ask them a bunch of questions. So that's sort of an informal solicitation. When it's done, you of course get their pricing, and generally is a management fee that's a percentage of rents. If your rents are very low, that fee will tend to be higher because they have to keep their doors open, but they will also charge directly a direct cost for some staff, like maintenance staff and so forth. So in that solicitation and negotiation, before you do it, you really need to understand how fees are typically structured so you can budget correctly. We have a question, Trudy, is that a question from?
Let's go to Trudy now. Hi, Trudy. Where are you calling from? Trudy, perhaps you've muted yourself. Trudy.
Well, I'm going to ask panelists in this business of scale. I happen to know a little about both your programs, but not a lot. But I assume they started on a very small scale. Bill, would you have a comment, say, on the operating a pretty small scale, 10 or 5 or 10 or 20 units? If you're in those shoes starting off, how would you approach this issue of whether to do this outside or to go outside for property management?
Now, because of the size, there's a lot of logic for having an outside management company, especially if you want to make as efficient and professional as possible. The tough part is that I mentioned earlier, Peter, that the fees are typically a little bit higher. I know when our company first got into it, the first 3 properties, the fee structure was set, and then as we added more properties, the fee structure changed. I'll give you an example. There was a little bit higher management fee than a traditional multifamily apartment community, but the reason is that was also paying for the person that was answering the phone and leasing the apartments. And that on a traditional multifamily, you have a payroll line item at the budget that would pay that out of the property expenses, whereas in this case it came out of the management fee. Delivering 3-day notices was another one where typically that's part of the on-site manager's costs in a traditional multifamily, whereas with scattered site, when we first opened, they were the management company was charging us a fee to deliver 3-day notices for non-payment of rent. So, kind of getting back to your management fees and RQ and RFPs is understanding exactly what folks are bidding on and what's included. Software. The key with scattered site is trying to be as efficient as possible, and a good software is critical for that. And when you've got a handful of units, it's tougher to justify the cost of a good property management software. Those are just some initial thoughts on, starting out smaller.
Yeah, I worked on both sides of this as a developer, hiring property managers, and I'm a chairman of a site rental company called City Homes Inc., a nonprofit in Baltimore. And I can say from my experience that no matter who's doing the management, managing 3 or 4 or 5 units is extremely expensive because there's no economies of scale. A lot of property managers, unless they're in the luxury home or vacation home business, just don't want to deal with 1 or 2 or 3 homes. Would that be your experience, Bill or Deb, either one of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends on the city you're in and what the capabilities of the management companies that are out there. There's a lot of them that really, it's not their niche. And it's not something. I mean, we put our properties out for. We've got about 400 rental units, and we put it out for RFP and RFQ and RFP. And there was one management company that does a tremendous amount of traditional multifamily apartments, and they do an extraordinary job, very good job. We came in as one of the 3 finalists, and I had a list of questions I wanted to ask each of the finalists, the 3 companies. One of the questions was, how often do you plan on driving by the property to make sure that the property is in good shape, and that there's nothing hanging, nothing falling down, that sort of thing? And this company, their answer was once a day. 400 properties scattered within the inner belt of Columbus, and we're fortunate that they're not scattered all over the state, but you would have to drive 24 hours a day in order to hit all 400 units once a day. And so it told us that they really hadn't thought about it. They really, this wasn't their bailiwick. Stick to the multifamily stuff, and we needed to talk to these other guys about the scattered stuff.
Well, is out there and among the participants that's looking at doing, say, a small number of units and wants to ask some questions about whether to keep trying to sell them or rent them, or we'll take a question on that if anybody wants to ask it.
Sure. Let's try to go back to Trudy again. Hi, Trudy. You're unmuted. Hello, Trudy.
We're going to move along then. This section has to do with when this scattered site rental model is being considered very, very early on at the development stage. I realize that some of you who may be considering it have finished building the homes and tried to sell them and couldn't. This doesn't really relate so much to you, but I think just it's still a good discussion for all of us to participate in. So you're just at the front end of a project, which is increasingly less likely as the NSP spending deadline looms. But let's say you do have some NSP funds left, your sales program hasn't worked out so well, and you're thinking of doing the rest of the homes as rental projects. So here are some sort of considerations to keep in mind if you're trying to weigh the for sale versus rental options. the challenge with the management is having properties dispersed across many target areas. Well, the obvious counterpoint to that is choosing properties that are close into each other within the same neighborhood, not a huge area. Sort of like Bill mentioned with Homeport, their homes are clustered around downtown Columbus, as I recall. Another challenge is just dealing with decentralized property management. That issue Bill raised about what do you do with all these homes out there? You don't drive by every day, but you've got to figure out how to manage that. One of the things is of course determining where your rent office will be. With the lower end rentals, you get an awful lot of walk-in clients who can and apply at your front window or front office. And of course another thing to keep in mind is all the responsibilities that are going to come with keeping up with the properties scattered over a large area. How often you drive by. Again, you hire a property manager to do that. We've covered those issues. We've also mentioned, the whole business of economies of scale. We'd say you're at the front end. Consider for sale versus rental option, and you're talking about 2 units or 3 units or 4 units. Managing 2, 3, 4, 5 rental units, scattered site, and for if you're a grantee, having to monitor those over a period of time. There's going to be very high cost to that and risks. It's such a small operation that it may lose attention and so forth. It can control expenses by standardizing equipment. And when doing the rehabs, any good rental property owner does this, trying to have the same faucets, same toilets, same HVAC equipment to the extent feasible. That can set some of your costs. And as Bill mentioned, having good data management, obviously when you're up in the number of units, they're hard to keep track of. You need some good software. So reducing these maintenance and operating costs, again, we're assuming you're able to shape the project well. Let's try to have them all in the same area, as we mentioned. Take care of all deferred maintenance through the rehab process and use energy efficient materials to keep, in this case, mostly your tenant costs down. We do find in the rental business that tenants are very aware of the energy costs of most tenants are aware of this and sensitive to it, and it's a real selling point to have energy efficient appliances and good insulation and so forth. It's their costs down, makes them more able to pay their rent on time, etc. Sort of a scattered site rental, as opposed to a large multifamily operation where you may have a maintenance staff. In a smaller operation, you're going to rely mainly on contractors. And one of the things you need to do to keep costs down is to go shopping for contractors who are used to working for homeowners who get charged various amounts from reasonable up to unreasonable. Sometimes you're looking for suppliers and contractors that actually work with rental housing operations and are used to getting calls in the morning and doing the work in the afternoon and doing it for a reasonable price. It's very different from calling improvement contractors and calling a summer electrician that might call as a homeowner and get charged one fee, but as a rental property owner that has a relationship, you can keep costs down. Purchasing can help, again, when you're on the front end doing the development. And I mentioned before, in our operation in Baltimore, where we have about 450 scattered site rentals, I'm a chairman of the board, not staff, but we have always required tenants to maintain yards and walkways. We wouldn't dream of having to send someone around weekly 450 homes to mow a bunch of pocket-sized yards that we have in Baltimore. St. Louis and Columbus, you folks, how do you handle the yard maintenance issues? Everything on the tenants?
Absolutely. We really try to promote the tenants taking as much care of the property as possible, and we do a lot of training for homeownership. Homeownership is not for everybody, but certainly for those that are interested in using our rental services as a stepping stone, they're going to have to do it sooner or later. So we really try to promote them taking care of the homes, and we have beautiful yard contests and different things in different neighborhoods to try to motivate them to even go a little bit further, just cutting the grass and keeping the house looking nice.
Great. Bill, staying in Columbus, or do you do some yard maintenance for your houses?
To what Deb said, that we require that the residents maintain their yard and actually do some of the maintenance within the interior and exterior of the house that a typical renter in an apartment wouldn't do. But to foster that, we also have classes that we offer on exterior maintenance and landscaping and interior and exterior maintenance that we do for free for the residents. And a lot of our homes are on the lease option program, and that part of the requirement is that they take these classes on how to maintain it themselves. With contractors lock up so that if a resident doesn't take care of it, that we're not hit with a city violation or some other kind of political issue, so that we can take care of it, but it gets billed back to the resident. It's some say at a punitive level, but we don't want to be mowing their lawn. We want them to move towards home ownership. So one of the things that we do as well.
Great. Thank you, Bill and Deb. I don't get a lot of questions on this. This is sort of a generic discussion. We're kind of late in the game for grantees or developers to be just now launching a big scattered site rental program. So this is time, I think, for just questions on starting out, conceiving project, that sort of thing. Any questions on that?
Yeah, we do have so Trudy sent her question in written form, and she says we are a small scattered site operation. We currently have for-profit property management company managing our PBV projects only. I'm not sure what a PBV project is. We are thinking of bringing the management in-house. What are the most critical issues we need to think of before we do this? We have one property manager in-house managing 46 leases over 25 properties right now.
Okay. So, out here, Ken, I'm having trouble seeing this question printed. What do I click to see it?
Over on the right side in the Q&A box.
I'm seeing a question from Henry.
Yeah, well, maybe she just sent it to me. That's okay. So to recap,
so what's the question here?
They're thinking of bringing the management of these properties in-house. They've been using a property manager, and what are any particular issues to be thinking of that you haven't already talked about when you're going the direction?
We've covered an awful lot of the issues. They go along. Could you either raise your hand and get on the phone? Maybe we can have a little dialogue about it. It sounds like you've got an operation at a fairly reasonable scale. I do see question here. Managing 46 leases over 20 properties. So, you know, it's already in the business and it's successful. I wouldn't see any not to consider it. So, if you have more specific questions, would you? Oh, seeing answers here. Dialogue. Judy, is there? You're getting on the phone and asking some more specific questions about this, or is that a good enough answer?
You're unmuted, Trudy. If you can unmute yourself or call in, and we're not hearing you again. Sorry.
Her phone must be muted. I'm sorry, Trudy. I don't know exactly what your situation is, but if you want to ask, text some more questions, we'll certainly.
And let's go to Henry, who's patiently had a question. Hi, Henry.
Hello. This morning, this afternoon, rather.
Good.
Hello. How this afternoon?
Doing well, thank you. What's your question?
Thank you. Actually, I'm in the business here, so hopefully this answer is not too basic. But my question is, would a small operation, say under 200 properties, or under 100 properties, would it be wise to manage the overall budgets in aggregate, or to operate with separate budgets for each property, so that it allows for the flexibility of properties to come in and go out, particularly those that the NSP wants to maintain some type of control over, and to continue to market?
So these properties would be leaving your inventory because they're sold. Is that the situation that would?
That possibility could exist, and that the NSP portion still wants to maintain the ability to be able to sell the properties if, say, the market starts to improve or what have you over a short period.
So I'll take your questions one by one. You're not asking. I mean, your organization already manages properties now, or just looking at getting into it, and you're wondering?
We're just starting to get into it. Yes, we're just starting to get into it.
Okay, starting meaning you're actually managing some of them?
A few, yes. We have about 8 that we're managing.
And it sounds like it could be as many as 100?
Yes.
It seems to me, I'll let Deb and Bill chime in a minute, but it's a fairly reasonable scale, but how are you staffed up for this? Do you have an experienced property manager on staff, or would you have the wherewithal to hire one pretty soon as you build volume?
As we do have an experienced property management staff, and we would be able to add if necessary as well.
So you have an experienced staff. Are you already in sort of the multifamily business and looking for this as an add-on?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
On the surface, it's like it can work. You've got the experienced staff. How many multifamily units do you have under management?
Approximately 2,500.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a different business. So, the leases are different. The tenant responsibilities are different. A lot of multifamily property managers are constitutionally opposed to managing single-family properties. But it's accepted as a different line of business, and people understand the difference. I think it can work. Bill, Deb, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll defer to you. I've got my first multifamily under construction, so definitely not my bailiwick just yet.
Okay, we've got all total about 2,200 units, and out of that about 400 are primarily single-family scattered sites. And it's a different beast. It takes a different mentality, a different mindset. In ways, in other ways, it's taking traditional multifamily and making it as fine-tuned and as efficient as possible. Do it properly. I think since you have the experience and you have the folks that are there, taking the ones that are open and entrepreneurial and open change and that sort of thing would be helpful to take on the site stuff. So keeping track of them individually versus aggregately. It depends on how well you want to manage it. I mean, most folks would probably accept managing it aggregately. If you want to know specifically address by address, what's your income, what's your expenses, it's a lot of administrative work, but it certainly gives you a ton of information. I'm not sure what the validity would be to have that specific of information. Don't get into analysis paralysis and that sort of thing. Is that kind of where you were going with that, Henry?
Yes, Bill. That is, and that does kind of answer my question.
Yeah, I mean, you're with any property management system, you're certainly going to know rents and collections by unit. The question is whether you're keeping track of expenses. And I know with homes in Baltimore, which I'm affiliated with, we have some we have scattered site rentals, and we have small multifamily properties, well as many as 30 units, so not that small, some of them. And we treat the multifamily separately in our budgets. We have sort of related packages of single family that are sort of in homogeneous neighborhoods. We budget and expense those separately. Some of our financing sources require us we finance, say, 100 single-family homes together in one package. The financing source requires us to keep those expenses budgeted and accounted separately for those 101 units, but not by unit. So that would be my comment. Did we have questions?
Yes, you have. I appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
And your program income question in a little bit. So, Kent, anybody else with hands up?
Nope. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Moving right along. SP rental requirements. This applies, of course, to single and multifamily, but I just want to do a quick walkthrough. Like many programs, like the tax credit program and others, home and so forth, the income is verified only at move-in. There's no annual recertification, so that makes this somewhat simpler if NSP is the only subsidy source. Units are originally set aside and occupied by households that are very low income, below 50% AMI, must be re-rented to that same income tier of clients. And here's your point on program incomes. I'm going to expect another question. We suggest using developer agreements for rental projects to eliminate having to manage NSP program income. That can be either a developer agreement that spells out exactly how the developer and the grantee participate in any net rental income, or it could be a loan agreement. It specifies, say, a set payment per month, assuming the project cash flows, or if it's a very, very low income rentals, often there is no cash flow. These agreements could be quite different. And if say the grantee itself, like the city of Peoria or whatever city, is doing it themselves, net rental income is program income, and if you're a subrecipient doing this as opposed to a developer, let's say you're a housing authority that can't be defined as a developer, there needs to be an agreement managing this program income. So Henry will, if you want to get back on, we'll take your question on program income. So Kent, hands up right now.
Yep. Here we go.
Okay, sorry about that. My question was more towards the accounting of program income with related agencies. If you have an agency that's related to the sub-grantee, what is the recommended process for either a management fee, for charging a management fee, or how would you indicate that or discuss that in a management agreement?
Let's walk through this. So your organization, you're with Chicanos por la Causa.
That's right.
You're a developer or subrecipient?
Subrecipient.
Recipient. You have a related entity that you would like to consider as a manager. It's a separate corporation, or is
That's
it
correct.
your own?
That's correct.
Entity, but you control it, no doubt. Or
that's correct. It's a subsidy of CPL.
Controlled entity. So the question is, how do you set up the agreements, and how do you set up the fin reimbursement system? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, John, or Hunter, can you help me out here, because this is just above my pay grade.
I think that level was possible.
You all say that, John, but anyway, rely on you. So
you want money?
This is a little tough. It's a related organization. I don't know.
I know.
The normal situation would be they'd have to charge directly for their time, keep time sheets and all that. Is there some workaround for that?
I wish there were, but no, there isn't. And we've had, I had to tell you, we've had auditors questioning these fees. Sometimes if it's a developer and there's a related, construction company and things like that, even, which is kind of a standard business practice. In my experience, they've questioned it. Not so much the fee itself, but the level of the fee. But if you're functioning as a subrecipient and you have a related entity, you are far off charging actual costs than trying to fight your way out of an audit.
So all your staff, Henry, this related entity would have to keep timesheets. They'd have to mark time for how much each day is spent on these properties. A lot easier if they're 100% dedicated staff to properties, and then you have issues unless you have an approved indirect rate. Are you able to recapture some of the indirect costs, like their a portion of administrative staff, HR, etc. It gets awfully complicated. So
100% assigned to the.
You have a subrecipient agreement, right?
Yes.
Of going back and changing it to a developer agreement, amending it?
No, I don't think so. I can ask that question, but I don't think so.
What happened, Henry?
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah, I can ask that question.
I think the answer is it's going to be a little difficult to deal with this company. If you could get out clean, you wouldn't have a problem. But John, correct me if I'm wrong, but they just can't. The company just shouldn't receive a fixed fee, right? Like 7% of rent or anything like that, right?
No, not a subrecipient. I mean, again, you're right about the developer. Now, I did want to clarify that if you do set up a developer arrangement, you would have to be developing the property as well as managing it. You couldn't just designate an entity to be as a developer to be a property management to be a property manager. That would just be a control thing, but yeah, it's just the way that OMB looks at these relationships. The T has a direct relationship and play all the federal rules, and
sure.
The subrecipients must play all those rules too, and that really ends up sort of pulling over to some of these other entities. So, I mean, in reality, it might be more expensive, less hassle to go, hire somebody outside a standard fee, a sort of industry standard type of fee on an arm's length relationship than it is to do all the record keeping in-house. So, it's not a great answer, but that's the best we've been able to do. So.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. Obviously, this question has been asked before, so I don't feel bad about that, but thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. We kind of short on time, so I'm going to through this quickly so we can get to our other panelists. Rule requirements, affordability, the home rent levels, and affordability periods are acceptable. John mentioned earlier how there's some guidance available on notching rents a little above the home high rent levels. Also, you can set rent levels, of course, lower than the low home rents. It's just a ceiling. So if you're serving very low or extremely low income households, you can certainly notch your rents lower. Let's see. These be adjusted by utility allowances. So if there are questions about what that means, why don't you save that question, because we're going to stop taking questions for a little while so we can get to the panelists. NSP, if you were to start off to do this activity, it could be under eligible use A for a simple purchase of an existing rental property as a loan. More often, this is going to be under B or D, eligible uses. Again, we'd suggest this, if all possible, this be structured as a loan. I know the PowerPoint says soft loan, but if all your renter at 100% of AMI, I suggest that might not be a soft loan, that it be a must-pay loan that into the first mortgage that's soaking up all the debt service capability. So it could be a soft loan, it could be a hard amortizing loan, depending on the situation. Again, we're running a little over time here, so I'm just going to leave these slides. They're available later. I think most of you realize that when you have very low income tenants, the rents are of course lower, and there's often not enough cash flow to support a loan, whereas 50 to 120% AMI certainly can carry debt. So I'm going to again skip over this Q&A, and we're just going to summarize right now some of the keys to success. Policies and procedures, you certainly would need to comply with NSP and to have a smooth running operation, have a operations manual, a good tight lease agreement, and a management plan. And Walter Howell says stick to it in capital letters. That's right, stick to it. And management, assure that the financial structure and projections for the properties create enough net cash flow to for the expenses. In other words, have a viable option. Selection, I think in our presentations later, we may hear a little more about the tips of the trade here, but certainly you want to look at tenants' rental history. There are some operations, many of them do criminal background checks now. Of course, you have to do screening for NSP, income eligibility. What we do in Baltimore, particularly because of scattered site rentals where the renters are responsible for maintenance, and we rely on that. Our executive director does a home visit with every single prospective client, goes to where they are living now before he accepts them as a tenant. It's worked out. Seems like an expensive, laborious policy, but it saves us a lot of problems because he constantly reminds us that seeing people in a living environment tells you a lot about their housekeeping responsibility and so forth. So that's why we say you might consider this. I know some very well-functioning operations probably don't do this, but it's something we do. Marketing efforts, you have to follow fair housing rules. You, of course, need to do enough marketing to get a good selection of tenants that you can interview and select from. Building before, the idea of the need to have good data management that increases with the larger number of units. Once you're over 10 or 20, it's very hard to keep things in your head or paper files. One thing that's suggested is keeping a data book on each home. Is more about maintenance than about other information management like repairs and expenses and so forth. But just to have a little book on each home that sort of tells you what the features of the home are, the appliances and so forth, so you're sending out maintenance staff, they know in advance whether they're in a refrigerator or toilet or whatever they're dealing with, so they can bring the right parts. And I know Bill's going to discuss this more later. Management, we've covered this before, and in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip over this slide. We've talked about the responsibility of an owner with a third-party manager. All your responsibilities don't go away. And finally, I'll just point to these resources that are available in the single-family rental toolkit. There are a number of documents and housing, which is represented on our panel, sent us a number of really wonderful set of documents that leases and policies, procedures, how they provide sort of supportive services to tenants who need a little help. To I understand, Deb, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have some folks who are recently homeless and need some support and so forth. They have a home ownership program. It's a very graded set of documents, very, very thorough. Suggest at that. There's a site rental training video. It's available on the NSP Help website. Finally, Neighbors took sort of the same idea as the NSP single-family rental toolkit and took it to a lot more sophisticated scale. So you have a lot of places to look for advice on this. And I'm going to skip the Q&A because we're running a little over, and we are going to move on to Bill Brett. Bill, you've got the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kind of interspersed some of the thoughts in the presentation as we've gone along, but our scattered site rental program, as I mentioned, we've got about 2,200 total units, and out of that, about 400 of them are primarily single-family homes. We have a third-party management company that manages them for us. We also have a third-party management company that manages our traditional apartment communities, but they're two separate companies. And again, it's because I think two reasons: because there's a special niche to it, and the company that we have managing our scattered site portfolio has other apartments, other single-family homes, other rental properties in the immediate neighborhoods where majority of ours are situated. We used the software that's out there that shows the streets and the mapping of the addresses and plotted out where we have rental homes versus where the management companies managed or owned properties in the neighborhood to see who had stuff that was close to where we were at, so that we had some economies of scale. Because if they have their folks in the neighborhood doing work orders on their stuff, it's going to cost us less money to have them be doing maintenance on our stuff. One of the key things is reducing the operating expenses. Traditionally, a lot higher costs associated with the scattered site for various reasons. Some of them obvious, where if you're going to go visit 3 units in a traditional apartment community, you could walk or go out your office and turn left, and there's all 3 of them. If there are 3 scattered sites that you're going to go see, you got to jump in your car, and it may take you a couple hours to do that. So just the windshield time is a lot more extensive with scattered site. That's a little more obvious. The other thing is that not all the units are identical like you would find in a traditional apartment community. So there's not all the 2 bedrooms are the same, not all the 3 bedrooms are the same, not all the 4 bedrooms are the same. They may be, totally unique floor styles and elevations and lot sizes and all kind of different aspects to them. So those economies of scales are definitely not there. We run anywhere from $750 to $1,000 per unit per year, expensive on scattered sites than we do multifamily, traditional multifamily, and that's everything included. And within that, I'm including real estate taxes. One of the reasons why scattered sites, and a lot of times folks just getting into it don't realize that that's an expense that typically the owner has to pay. And oftentimes the value of the house is valued as other houses in the area, not so much a low income that's based on the value driven by the income approach to the value. So we have traditional apartment communities that are 500 a unit or 600 a unit in real estate taxes, whereas we've had some single-family homes that are 2,200 to 2,400. That's extreme, but significantly higher in real estate taxes, and that's per year. So you've got to take that into account. A lot with the management companies to reduce that windshield time and increase those economies of scale is critical. When we switched from one management company to another on our scattered sites, that company went out to every house, all 400 of them, and put together a database. And I think Peter mentioned that a little bit earlier. But they measured every window. They measured every floor. They measured every bedroom size. They made note of what type of appliances, what type of refrigerator, what type of furnace, what type of garbage disposal, so that when a work order came in, they were able to consult this database and have the parts ready for the maintenance guy when he went to do the work order. It wasn't a matter of the maintenance guy driving over to the property, let me measure this window, let me drive over to Home Depot, see if they have it, let me, drive back to the property and stop and grab a cup of coffee on the way back, and those sorts of things. It was, on his work order, he's going to that home, the mini blind in the back of his vehicle, and he was ready to go in and install it, and he was done. So using that database is time-consuming and expensive on the front end, but pays for itself 100 times over on the back end. This particular company went so far as being guys from one day to the next, and the night before they would have lesser-paid employees come in and work, quote-unquote, second shift, and they would start pulling the work orders for the upcoming day and start to pull parts and the maintenance guys would need the following day. So that maintenance guy showed up in the morning, there was a bin or a pile of parts for just his work orders. There was a clipboard with his work orders, and there was a stack of parts that he would need for those work orders. And so you didn't have a $18, $20, $25 an hour maintenance tech going around pulling parts. You had somebody that came in the night before that was an $8 or $10 an hour employee that was pulling parts. Interestingly enough, the company did a lot with what we call social enterprise, where they actually hired a number of our residents to be those second shift people and got them going into a job and into a trade that they could then work into a maintenance position down the road. Just different ways to reduce those windshield time and improve the economies of scale. Go over the costs and how to reduce them with standardization of materials and fixtures. Another key, when we looked at our 400 homes, a lot of them were tax credit properties that were bundled into 20-unit, 30-unit, 40-unit communities. So we had 10 different legal entities with an average of about 40 homes in each entity. Every time development and construction would build a new one, they use a different spec for different things. So we had probably 6 or 8 different types of faucets. We had probably 2 or 3 different types of garbage disposals. And we had 3 or 4 different types of furnaces. So again, you'd have to go back to that database and consult what do you have in that unit, and then you'd have to stock all those parts for those various types. So we actually did a study on the cost of inventory and the cost to repair different faucets and found that it was cheaper to replace all 400 units worth all their faucets in the kitchens and the bathrooms, in the vanities in the bathrooms, so that we had the same faucet, only had to stock the parts for those faucets and train the maintenance guys on how to repair just those faucets. So from again, economy of scale standpoint, it made sense to buy all those brand new faucets, but then either not have to repair them, or when we did repair them, we knew exactly what we had. So, that's just a couple of little tidbits of some of the things that we did to maximize the economy of scale. The other thing I didn't mention, we have classes. I did mention the classes where we teach the residents how to do landscaping and some of the interior and exterior maintenance. But one of the things I didn't mention is that we also have a loaner program where if a resident, we encourage them to buy their own lawnmower and maintain it, become more of the typical homeowner. But occasionally one would break down, it would get stolen, whatever it might be, so rather than have to face, high grass because they couldn't afford to buy a new one, we have a loaner program where they could come check out a mower, a weed whip, a hedge trimmer, those sorts of things. Again, encouraging the residents. We do quarterly inspections by our management company so that we're getting into the houses on a quarterly basis. And with not just going in and writing up work orders, but going in with a team that has a bucket of parts and supplies and tools so that while they're there, they can proactively fix things. And dramatically cut down on the number of work orders, and instead of going out and doing inspection, writing it up, and then leaving and somebody else having to come back. Again, just other example. The maintenance costs. We started to put, for example, allure flooring into all of our properties so that we have less carpeting into the units, because carpet's a big expense for replacement. So we put allure flooring, which is kind of like it's the old Pergo. So only the stuff they make today is a lot nicer looking, has grain in it, and that way when you dump Kool-Aid or iron your clothes in the living room floor or drop a cigarette or all the different things that result in a carpet replacement, you don't have to with this allure flooring. So we're looking at other things that you could do to reduce the replacement costs. So, having a database for each of the units is important. Reducing the maintenance cost is critical. Software system, the company uses a software called Yardi, Y-A-R-D-I. It's expensive. It costs about $3,000 a property, but it's very user-friendly and has a lot of databases that you can use to track the things we've already talked about. But overall, any database or site book, that can reduce the labor costs, the maintenance costs, and transportation costs is going to pay for itself in the long run. So, let's see.
Good. Well, let's instead of going to questions here, and thank you, Bill. Clearly, a lot going on with Homeport and Columbus Housing Partnership, and y'all will have opportunity to ask Bill and Peter some questions, but let's do that at the end and go now to the second case study and to Deb Dunbar. Hi, Deb.
And good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us here. Our mission at Beyond Housing is really focused around the family. We strengthen neighborhoods one family at a time. We emphasize family stabilization, and we've really used the house as a vehicle for service delivery. So we are going to hit, by the end of this year, we'll be over 400 single-family scattered site homes. That's all we do. As I mentioned, we've got our first multifamily under construction. It'll be a senior building, so I may be calling some of you for information on how to do that well. But scattered we've done for the past 35 years. It's all outside the city of St. Louis. We're in suburban neighborhoods. We really chose the areas and the areas for the families. Liked having them not in a concentrated area with other families in their same situations. So we wanted them in different school districts, having a little bit of that appropriate behavior modeling with, a little bit of the keeping up with the Joneses. They're seeing people go to work every day, keeping their yards nice, maintaining their homes. So we wanted to have examples all around them. As far as our inventory, we kind of build it with a variety of programs. For those of you who have been doing this a long time, you'll remember the Mod Rehab program. So we've got 100 or so units that we developed using that. We do a lot of low-income housing tax credit rentals. We've got about 250 of those. And then we thought the NSP program would be a great way to get another 25 units into our inventory. And we set out initially to use the NSP program for rental housing. So Pete talked about kind of the front-end strategy. If you're in that spot, I would definitely say pay attention to location. If you've got other homes that you manage or own, locate those homes in that area. We do a lot of community building. So we looked at our targeted footprint. We work within one particular school district. Got about, 60 homes in one municipality, for example. So we looked at the foreclosed homes in that area, one or two homes on a block that could really make a difference. That's how we chose where we would put our NSP houses. Worked with our grantee is St. Louis County. They've got some pretty specific ideas about how they wanted the houses to look and the quality, which has been a great intimate for some of our renters because we've got some really nice homes. One of the keys to being successful, I think, with scattered site is working with your resident. I call it hard and soft property management. So the hard side is signing a lease, having that business relationship up front, and then the soft side is the social service component that we have. The property managers and social service coordinators work the tenants to work on their family and work on their home. So we do expect them, like Bill and what Peter talked about, to maintain the homes, to go beyond just the snow removal and the cutting of the grass, do minor maintenance, learn some skills that are going to carry over for them if they decide to go into home ownership. So really try to use the house as the vehicle to tell them about home ownership and give them some skills that they can take with them when they finally leave. We also operate a home ownership center, so we've got access to home buyer education, individual development accounts that can help with down payment assistance, home repairs. We have credit counseling, and we really try to plug in all those services to the families in our rental homes. SP in particular, because they are nicer homes, are in communities where we already do work. We tried to find some folks that had maybe gone through our home buyer education, weren't quite ready to buy, needed to work on their credit and other things. Being in a rental situation with their own home would be the perfect stepping stone. So that was one marketing tool that we used. Policies and procedures are huge. Can't emphasize those enough. If you don't have compliance in place and know what you're doing, work on tenant eligibility, be very vigilant, about making sure you're dotting all your I's, crossing all your T's, understanding exactly what the eligibility rules and requirements are, staying up to date on training. It will save you so many headaches down the road. Speaking of hard, those are hard lessons to learn if you've ever rented a tax credit unit to someone who wasn't income eligible. Same goes for NSP. So I would really pay attention to that, whether you're doing your own management or you're choosing a management company to help you with that. As far as marketing goes, you want to get the benefit you can possibly get. Lucky, we've been around a long time. We have tremendous word of mouth. We probably get 250 calls a month with people wanting to rent homes. But the problem is that some of them make too much money, some of them make too little money. So it's finding the folks that meet the NSP guidelines that you're looking for. So some of the ways that we've done that, we've worked with our local housing authorities. You've got some guaranteed rent coming in there. As Peter said, we still go out and visit our tenants' homes before they move in, so we can kind of see where they're coming from. We market a lot in the neighborhoods where we have other rental housing and where we have vacancies, obviously. Grocery store bulletin boards, other homeowners in the neighborhood, home associations, community associations, churches. We've run some papers. We've used the local municipal governments. Really finding the key to what works. But I would say don't be shy. Be aggressive on your marketing. There's lots of folks out there looking for rental properties right now. What else? I'll echo everything that Bill said on data and systems. The more information you can get ahead of time, the more standardized you can get. We do all the things that he discussed as far as having a data book on properties. We use a software called AppFolio. It's very intuitive, very user-friendly. We've been pleased with it so far. When we first started doing self-management, we did manual ledgers and debit credit columns and moved to another software that wasn't quite as advanced, and now we finally hit the big time with something that gives us all the information that we're looking for. Lastly, I would, as far as advice to grantees or to developers, deal. Know how it's structured, know the financial requirements. We always say we're firm, fair, and consistent. If you apply the rules the same way every time, you cannot go wrong. Of our mission side, so we're big into the family and giving people a second chance. We do all of the background checks that Peter and Bill mentioned. We're looking at criminal backgrounds, credit checks, so we really have a good idea of the tenant that we're looking at renting to. But we also realize that the folks that us do sometimes need a second chance. So we're going to look at how long ago some of these things happened, where they're living now, how well they're taking care of their home, and see if it's not maybe the right time for them to work towards home ownership. I've been very lucky with, as I said, with St. Louis County. Ours are very quality. We were able to do a full rehab with a lot of the energy efficient things that Peter talked about. And I'll say go green, but don't go crazy. Just go tankless water heaters that need the filter cleaned out every couple months. Maintenance people will hate you. But definitely energy efficient. Look for things that are going to cut down cost, and think of your maintenance and think of the value added. And they've been very easy for us to market, so we've been very fortunate. I think that's it.
Yeah, this is Bill. I mean, one of the things that we've looked at is in terms of the marketing of the properties that the traditional way of marketing the property was to put a sign out front that said for rent. I think folks in the neighborhood read that more as free copper, free appliances.
Depending on what neighborhood you're in, that is definitely the case. We've had some problem with that in St. Louis as well.
Okay. You had Craigslist and some of that. One of the things management company did is they put a sign on the side of each of the houses that said, this rental, another rental by Community Properties of Ohio. Mm-hmm. And so it identified the rental as, being managed by that company, so that if folks were looking for something, they would call that company and tell them what area they were interested in. The company also had a tremendous reputation as being tough on crime, and so people knew not to mess with those houses as well. It's just kind of it was one of those things that you don't think about until you get into it, and so you throw your sign out front, and it's like, maybe that's such a great idea after all.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very sensitive to which neighborhoods we use for rent signs in. It's a great idea. We're in many different municipalities, so it's a great idea to make friends with your local police department and let them know when you have a vacancy, let them know where your home is. They'll usually increase patrols and work with you. We also use, I didn't mention, SoServe.com, and I'm not sure if that's a national site, but I think there are similar ones where you list your property. You don't give the exact address, but you give the area and all the amenities and the price range and those kinds of things, and that's been very helpful to us as well.
Mention the software again you guys use?
It's Appfolio, APP-Folio. Just started using it, so talk to me again in 6 months, and I may be cursing it. But thus far, it has been a great help to us. For example, for marketing, once you get all the property information put in, you click a button, and it'll send a little flyer to your website. It'll put it on Craigslist. Whatever websites that you have a relationship with that you can post to. So we've been pleased with it so far. I've heard great things about Yardi, and maybe when we get to your scale, Bill, we'll be ready for something like that. But I think for where we are, Appfolio's going to do the trick.
Yes, this is Peter. Does Appfolio, does it have an accounting function, or is it just a property management function?
No, it also has an accounting function. You can put in all the general ledger accounts. It's great for managing your own. It's also good if you're managing for others. Our CFO is pretty strict about his accounting software, so we keep it separate from Beyond Housing proper's. He uses Great Plains Dynamics, but yeah, Appfolio definitely has the accounting side.
So it could stay alone to do all the data management you need if you needed all those functions, right?
Absolutely.
And Bill, Yardi, does that have an accounting function, or is it just property management function?
No, it's got all different segments. It's got accounts receivable, accounts payable. It has a work order component to it. Work order component is good. It'll track how many work orders, how many per maintenance guy, how long it takes. You can set it up so that it codes work orders. So if you want to know how long it takes each of your individual maintenance guys to do a garbage disposal, you can pull that information out and use it for setting up training for to improve that efficiencies as well. So there's a whole bunch of different things. I mean, it's garbage in, garbage out, but if you set it up right, it's got a lot of good components to it.
Absolutely. I know ours, and I'm sure Yardi does the same thing. We can enter a work order, and our maintenance guys have smartphones, so they can get the work order immediately while they're out in the field. And ideally, if they're in the area, then already it saves a time to the warehouse or back to the office.
Yeah, I did point out about the work with City Homes in Baltimore has a small maintenance staff, just a couple of people. We have some sort of janitorial staff in larger multifamily buildings, but for the single family, we use almost entirely small contractors, small and large, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, wallpapering, painting, all those sorts of things. And we've a lot of success of City Homes was the president of City Homes, also the general manager, sitting down with and interviewing a number of these contractors who typically work for commercial and multifamily clients, owner clients, and actually negotiating unit prices with them and testing them out. And I'd say one of our biggest keys to success, where we didn't want to staff up with maintenance staff, was selecting a really good stable of they call themselves ticket work contractors. You call them up and you say, go to this address, do this repair, and write a ticket for it. So it's ticket work in the trades. And these people have become really like quasi-staff. I mean, they know the properties. They have fixed price for roofs, for replacement furnaces, all negotiated in advance. So they sort of act like staff, but it allows us to ebb and flow with the needs. We don't have to keep the staff busy all the time. So it's another strategy to consider.
Now, Peter, you mentioned
the extra costs, $750 to $1,000 extra for single family. Did you say, Bill?
Yes.
I point out that our most expensive properties in Baltimore, we stay away from them, are detached single family homes. We have almost all row houses because maintenance costs go up tremendously. There are four walls exposed to the elements as opposed to a townhouse or apartment. More roof area, more dormers, more windows. It's exponentially larger expenses for detached single-family homes. So, are yours detached in Columbus?
Yeah, majority of them are detached and sit on about an eighth of an acre lot, and you have a detached garage, two-car garage that goes with it. And, so we've done just about everything we can to make it more challenging to operate them.
Right.
One of the things you mentioned,
increment of $750 to $1,000. I bet half of that is just for the extra maintenance costs. Wouldn't you guess?
Yeah. Now, one of the things you mentioned, Peter, wallpaper. One of the things we've been kicking around, I mentioned the Allure flooring in the living areas and stuff. We're looking at wallpaper on some of the walls. I mean, you think about hotel room. You never have to wait for your hotel room because they're painting it. They're all wallpapered. And we're like, okay, can we cut down on our turnover costs if we wallpaper some of these houses? So we're currently looking at that. We're looking at granite countertops, which people say low-income housing, you're crazy. Well, another one of the turnover expenses is, people want to take a hot pot off the stove and set it on top of the Formica, and now you got a burn mark in the Formica. You got to replace that countertop. So the lesser expensive granite is coming down in price to the point where it's a little bit more expensive than Formica, but you don't have to hardly ever replace it. So those are some of the things that we're looking at on our scattered site portfolio, and it's interesting because some of the stuff we're learning on the scattered site is carrying over to our multifamily. So
I'll echo the same thing. We did start using in our last tax credit project the lower cost granite, and that's been a huge selling point, and it's been a great boon for maintenance. We've also started using the Pergo-like flooring. And we've never used carpet. We've always stayed away from that. It used to be the VCT, and which isn't very attractive, but certainly functional. And we've gone so far as to eliminate garbage disposals. We never use dishwashers, for example, to try to keep the maintenance costs as low as possible. And of course, the standardization that you mentioned is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, I'm going to jump in here. We're just going to go over the last resources page and feedback. I want to let everybody know, we'll skip through the conclusion. We've already gone through this, but these slides and all of the materials will be available online after they should be available right now on the Resource Exchange. You can go to all these links for requesting TA or ask a question, and you can also access the single-family toolkits, the NeighborWorks toolkits, and the scattered site video. I just remind you that we value your feedback, so we have a feedback link that you'll be immediately redirected to once the webinar ends. So if you can go to this link and give us your thoughts on the presentation, we'd appreciate it. Want to keep you guys on, Deb and Peter and Bill, for any additional questions. We actually have one through the Q&A box, which I'm going to read out and see what you guys think on. So some grantees will have a number of unsold homes sitting on the market for a while. Lease own will likely be an afterthought. Can case study presenters or Peter speak about the scattered site management cost for, say, 25 scattered site single-family homes in a small-sized city? The grantees out there that have a very small inventory, say around 25, what kind of costs go into that? What sort of considerations do they have? So maybe, Peter, if you want to start out, and then we'll go to Bill and Deb and see what you guys think.
Sure, glad to. I mean, yes, it's generally costs. Obviously, there's real taxes, insurance, property and casualty insurance, and those are variable by market and by value of the home, etc. Maintenance costs. I'm not sure you're asking that question or whether you're more interested in the management costs, but obviously you have to have a repair and maintenance budget. If you're holding these for the long haul, which I think you should count on, even in perhaps a purchase program, you'd need a replacement reserve. And I know City Homes, we peg maintenance and replacement. These are for row houses, probably around $1,200 a year. We never did gut rehab. It was moderate rehab, so we're in a continual replacement state. We do about 10% of all our 400 roofs every year, X% of furnaces, so forth. So maintenance and replacement. I think 25 units, you should be able to find I don't know what city you're in, but around and look for the property managers that do handle the scattered site rentals. The single family to boot, not just small multifamily. And I think you'll probably, not knowing the size of the city, you'll probably find someone in that business. Multifamily managers, as mentioned before, might be uncomfortable with this model, not used to it, even opposed to it, even though they may want to bid on the work. So the interviews and figuring out, where their head are at and what their experience is awfully important. But, 25 units is enough. It's not going to be super efficient, but I would put out, and I can't exactly predict what the management, occupancy management, and maintenance management, all those costs would be, but maybe Deb could take a step at that. I know that, we with City Homes, those kind of costs at about $500 a unit a year. That's sort of our core cost of management, including maintenance. So, Bill or Deb, could you have some numbers to compare with us?
Well, I can tell you that our unit cost for one of our typical homes is about $46 a year, and that's for insurance, real estate taxes, if it's in a for-profit partnership. And that actually, for us, we have some that run a little bit higher than that, but our average is about $4,600 a year.
Yeah, that's a reasonable, somewhere in the $4,500 to $5,500, depending on the taxes and whether it's an older rehab versus newer construction.
Sure. With city homes, we have relatively modest-sized row homes that don't only have 2 exterior walls in most cases, and are relatively inexpensive to maintain. I think we're looking at about $3,800, and that's a very refined system with some very hard bargaining with the maintenance contractors. So if you were on that kind of system, you wouldn't have our economies of scale. I suspect it would be up in the $4,500 range.
He mentions, that during their research that they found Appfolio and Propertyware to be both very user-friendly and functional in terms of accounting systems. Thanks for that, Henry. And, we're figuring out while you're figuring out if you have any more questions to ask, and we encourage any questions you may have. And this just reminds you that this is being recorded and will be posted on the Resource Exchange website shortly, and also a copy of the PDF copy of the slides will be there too. And coming up, several more NSP webinars in the hopper, or as Walter mentioned earlier, the next 2 in this What Now series next week on land banking on the 10th, and then on the 17th, peer-to-peer kind of roundtable sort of webinar, and then April 24th, the NBC underwriting of single-family and rental housing, and an open forum Q&A on May 1st. So we hope you'll join us for any of those that are appealing to you. And let's see, so hands up or questions in? I don't see any more. So do our panelists have last words or conclusions you'd like to make?
I'd like to thank Bill and Deb. Tremendous experience you bring to it. A little different operations, both very exemplary in their own ways. So it's terrific having you on this webinar.
Thank you, and it's a lot of fun. And the only thing I'd like to leave everybody with is go into it with eyes wide open. Ask a lot of questions. Talk to people that are doing it. Our information is up there. Feel free to shoot emails or ask a lot of questions.
Absolutely. I'll echo that, and don't try to reinvent the wheel. If there's anything that we've got that we can share, we're more than happy to do that. And one word on contractors, and I learned this lesson the hard way: make sure they are insured. Make sure you have their certificate of insurance, and know when they're expiring and get new ones on file.
Workman's comp insurance. City homes,
Absolutely.
We deal with such small subcontractors. We carry workman's comp. Some of them. We have two price schedules for what we pay them without us paying workman's comp, but they've got their own liability insurance. That's a little tip from our experience with contractors. Need kinds of insurance.
Lots of tips today, both big and small. So thank you all for that and for being here, sharing your experience. We appreciate it. And to all the participants, thanks for coming. And to the folks at HUD and to Walter at Enterprise, thank you for your input and organization and all that you do for the NSP program. So we look forward to seeing you all soon at another NSP webinar. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Kent.